Who gets the budget? How does the budget get spent? Is an R&D budget the same as an IT budget? To try to solve the same thing, that's often a bit of a ego battle at a C-suite or a board meeting.
I mean, I think it's definitely complex. Ultimately, I think the accountability of all IT budget is with the CIO. That's the expectation of the C-suite, of the strategic executive team. Of course, then there is kind of how the mechanisms of the funding model actually works and who sort of owns what, who has the decision rights, who has the FTEs, and who has the resources. That combination of those three is what I call accountability. So sometimes one or two of those three things, might be either devolved or might be, in a commercial market, for example, versus a sort of a central IT bucket, etc. But it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I think the line is all in terms of, the decision rights and the allocation of resources, it's all with the CIO. I think the complexity also comes in with the sort of the layer cake of, are you really thinking through the life cycle management of end to end of the, not just doing a project, a large or a small project, but actually what implications does it have in terms of once the project goes live, who maintains it, who upgrades it, etc. And I think this is where the biggest usual, I would say, the complex challenge is, because when the different parts of the business are thinking about, they're really thinking about the upfront investment. They're not actually thinking about the end-to-end life cycle. And this is where the pressure goes. We call it the growth budget. The growth goes like that, so you can have more and more budget to invest. Yet the IT budget is always under pressure. So you need to be more and more efficient to subsume more of these capabilities being introduced at the same cost and the same quality and a high level of, I would say, the service level agreements and objectives. So that's where the challenge is in terms of, it's not who owns the budget, but actually how does it really work, and at what point do you say can't take any more? So we need more. We need to have more run budget, so to speak.
So that's an interesting discussion in terms of product and slice of the pie at one given time, or sort of continuum, right? Instead of I'm doing a project, IT is well known for being like the guys who run over budget on a project or have to deliver something faster, more secure and quicker. How do you balance that? Or what are some of the thoughts of how do you even look at the culture change, I guess?
Well, in our company, it's even slightly different to what you were describing, because the CIO doesn't own all the IT budget, because we're an IT company. We are IT providers for our customers. And the lines can get quite interesting there on who is spending what, who's got the governance of what. But it's very much, I think, what we're starting to see is a discussion that really encompasses the business. And it's actually a bit easier for us because they're also IT people. Mm-hmm. But it's more working with them to look at the business benefits and not just on the IT cost. The IT cost for the running of your landscape will always be under pressure. Will always have to be competitive. You have to drive efficiencies. But getting the right investment that allows the business to grow, I think, is something that the CIO needs to really work with the business to understand what helps the business.
I think that's quite an interesting point, because in my company with Tata, you've got hundreds of people that are expert in networking or in applications. So I really respect the CIO because he has a really tough time. Whenever he puts something forward, there's always somebody that's got a better idea that can do it cheaper. So one of the things that we've really formulated within our organisation is to bring the industry experts together and get them to debate. What is it you're trying to do? How are you trying to do it? Who are you appealing to? And then I think one of the hardest questions we turn around and ask of ourselves internally, what's going to happen in 2 years? Because that's the one that so many people fall flat on. You do get the
You mean I'm not done, digital transformed, I bought my security.
No, you've got to carry on, because we all know, if you just look at some of the vendors, their products change every 18 months and you have to accommodate that. There's new ways of working. We're always trying to push things that little bit further with the boundary. So what we tend to say to our internal customers, and then to our external customers as well, is let's just have a look what's going to happen in 2 years. Your purchasing decisions today, how are they going to stand up in 2 years' time? Are they still going to be sound, or do you have to have some midlife wake up that turns around and says, well, actually the market's done this now, so I need to bring that capability back in. So whenever we go and talk to the various companies that we do, they do fall into several camps. You get that, I own the budget and this is the project. And you have that conversation saying to them, well, you know, things change. How can you accommodate that? And that's always an interesting question, because that then goes back to the board as, oh, can we have some more budget in 24 months' time, please?
So is it an education role? What's the...
I think it is an
change?
education role. And I think to your point, and you touched on it earlier, Prasant, that life cycle approach, you know, how do you create that 360 view of the service that you're providing, the IT service? And it could be an application, it could be a network, it could be a piece of infrastructure. How do you get a 360 view? Someone's got to own that, because you've constantly got to be looking at the market, looking at technology. We're on a hamster wheel. And this hamster wheel...
And there's no shortage of
hamster
things
wheels
thrown at
Yeah.
you.
And if you're not careful, you will lose control. I remember when we first dipped our toe into a well-known cloud provider of compute. I won't name the name, but we lost control quite quickly because we actually didn't look at the consumption model. And the developers were great. They used loads of compute, kept moving workload from our data centers onto this flexible compute platform. And you know, our spend profile went out of control very quickly. We had controls in place, but that was on a monthly cycle, not on a daily, hourly, by minute cycle that some of these new models are coming to the market. So education is a huge component of that, not only within your IT function to make sure you have the right skills to be able to control the costs, control the projects, but also to the business so they understand the models as well. So I think a lot of the decisions come from the business. That IT don't do a very good job of articulating back the consequences of the decisions that they're making. And I think that's our responsibility. We are an educator as a CIO to our own people within our function and back to the business.
I totally agree. And if I may just build on your point, I think we need to provide the appropriate level of data to help with the framing. And very often, I think if you're educating without data, it's just preaching, right?
I mean, it's just an opinion.
It's just an opinion, right? I think there are a few tools, for example, that we've employed around total cost of ownership for everything we do. I mean, anything we look at the TCO of it. We also do a yearly sort of bill of IT, which is effectively what the direct cost to a particular internal customer function is.
Down to a product and customer function level.
That's right. And we also then add the kind of the allocations from infrastructure, networks, etc. So they see what the full consumption is to their function. So whether it's early research or development or supply chain, they get a total bill of IT so that they can understand really what are the consequences of some of the decisions that they've decided to make. And that then helps in the long range planning and the portfolio process that you called out. And I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you need a very strong enterprise architecture function. And you know, every CIO's job, I really genuinely think, is to think like an enterprise architect. You need to be architecting 3 years so that it's fit for future, because the technology is changing so fast. You need to be agile, and whatever you're doing now, you need to make sure you don't lock yourself into something or out of something. And I think that's the real fine balance. You know, what you're going to agree now, I think might look amazing, but literally in 12 to 18 months from now, you might be already behind.